The presentation that I will be giving is about Peter, Abelard, and Heloise. They were an unexpected but extremely important roller coaster love story for the ages. Abelard and Heloise's relationship is often described as one of history's most passionate and romantic love stories. In 12th century Paris, young, intellectually gifted niece of Notre Dame's Canon Fulbert, Heloise seeks to find the answer to the question of human existence. Only one teacher in Paris can give her the answers that she needs, a man 20 years her senior named Peter Abelard, who teaches at Notre Dame. He is enthralled by her intellect and wit because it is almost on par with his own. They become closer as they spend more time together and find it impossible to resist the physical desires, even though the laws at the time forbade such a relationship. They eventually give in to their physical desires, and Heloise becomes pregnant, which at this time is a huge scandal. After they realize this, they know it is not safe for Heloise to stay in Paris any longer. They decide to flee to Brittany together, where Abelard is from. Heloise's uncle, Canon Fulbert, arranges a secret wedding between Abelard and Heloise to protect Heloise's dignity, or at least that is what Heloise and Abelard think are his intentions. But it turns out that he actually has feelings for Heloise himself and wants to ruin Abelard and keep Heloise all for himself. To keep herself safe, Heloise decides to flee to a convent in Argenteuil. Abelard is not so lucky and is viciously attacked in Paris and castrated before he was able to leave. Abelard decides that he is no longer worthy to work as a teacher at Notre Dame and decides to become a monk. Abelard and Heloise know that they cannot continue on and decide together to take up holy orders as a monk and a nun. This means that Heloise has to give up her child, her son, and that she knows she will never see him again after she gives him up. Once the two are separated, they write love letters to each other for 20 years after. After many of these years have passed, they happen to meet again at an event in Paris. While there, they agree to remain forever one, but they both go their own separate ways after the event is over. Sadly, they never meet again after that. They both eventually die in their own separate areas of the country and are buried separately. But a woman by the name of Josephine Bonaparte, who was beyond moved by their love story, years after they had died, decided that these two, with a love of this magnitude, must be buried together. She wanted them to be forever one, like they promised to each other before they died. She brought the remains to Père Lachaise cemetery in Paris and entombed them together. Today, there are stone statues of each of them laying next to each other with their hands folded. Couples and lovers now go to this tomb to visit where Abelard and Heloise remain together forever. You can see pictures of their statues on this slide, and the tomb is the picture on the right. Although most people know Abelard for his role in the Letters of Abelard and Heloise, he was also a prominent philosopher, poet, and theologian of the 12th century. He used reason in matters of faith and was also the first to use theology in today's sense of the word. He had a quick wit, which made him almost unbeatable in debate, and was rumored to have never lost an argument. His affair with Heloise led to his downfall, so some considered him to be a romantic tragedy. He had many famous philosophical works, including 6 works on dialectic, which were concerned with logic, philosophy of language, metaphysics, and philosophy of mind. He also wrote 3 works about ethics and many works that dealt with philosophical theology. The letters that they wrote to each other are now famously called the letters of Abelard and Heloise. They consist of 8 letters that kept the love alive between the two while they were apart. The first letter was written several years after their separation, and it is from Abelard to Philotenus, who is a friend of his. He writes about his suffering, his love of Heloise, and its consequences. The first letter accidentally got to Heloise, and she read it. The second letter is from Heloise to Abelard, responding to what he said about her in the first letter. This letter awakened her passion that had lain dormant for many years for Abelard and relit the flame between the two. The third letter is a response from Heloise to Abelard about her last letter. He apologizes for some of the stuff that he said about their relationship. His letter was not meant to be seen by her. It was meant for his friend who was going through a breakup himself. He was trying to make his friend feel better, so he was harsh about their relationship in the letter. In the fourth letter from Heloise to Abelard, Heloise is quite upset. All of her past feelings have been revitalized, and she is almost reliving the heartbreak. She begins to sort of reminisce on the good times and the good feelings, but also on the bad times and the bad feelings. Heloise wrote the fifth letter after she recovered from being very sick at the convent. She says that she wants to distance herself from him, but is struggling with some feelings that complicate things. The sixth letter, which I had you read, was the last correspondence between the two. I thought that it was important to read, since it was basically the last words they exchanged. In this letter, Abelard realizes that he has to devote his life to being a monk, and he knows that him and Heloise must stop writing so that they can both hold true to their vows. The seventh letter is actually a verse epistle called Heloise to Abelard that was written by Alexander Pope and was published in 1717, based on the story of Abelard and Heloise. It is basically an interpretation of Heloise's feelings and emotions during the time that she and Abelard exchanged letters. The eighth letter, Abelard to Heloise, is another verse epistle written by Judith Cowper Madan as an epistolatory reply to Pope's Heloise to Abelard. It is written in the same style and interprets Abelard's feelings during the time that he corresponded with Heloise. As I said before, I had you read this letter because it was the last real correspondence between the two lovers before they died. This letter talks a lot about Christianity and the duties that monks and nuns are supposed to live by and fulfill. At the start of the letter, Abelard tells Heloise that they must cease communication and stop reliving their past lives because they became part of the clergy for a reason. They must now devote their lives to God. Abelard wants to be there for her, but obviously he cannot. So he tells Heloise that their relationship struggles were all a part of God's plan, and that their lives now are penance for having offended and gone against what God wanted in the past. Their scandalous relationship. He tells Heloise that in order to get into heaven, they need to give up talking to one another and accept that their relationship was over long ago. Abelard wants Heloise to be a perfect Christian, even if that is hard to do. He tells her that she should never give up trying. After all, he knows how smart she is from teaching her for all those years, and knows that she can learn to be a great Christian just as she learned other things in school. She must work to destroy the devil and must never let him win. She must work as hard as she can to resist temptation and put Christ above all things, especially herself. After this, he reminds her that she is the head of a society within the convent, and she must set a good, godly example for those below her. She must work at this in order to be the best and most virtuous version of herself. If she does this, then death will appear agreeable. He tells her that she must be as saintly as possible to stay in God's good graces. She must not sit idly by. She must renounce herself and follow Christ. But she also must take care of herself, because God saved her, just like He saved everyone through sacrificing His Son on the cross. If she follows all that He said, then she will enjoy eternal rewards. He ends their last letter by wishing that she sheds as many tears for her salvation as she shed over the course of their relationship. Heloise breaks some of the gender stereotypes of women from this time period when she says in the first letter, I believe, that she would rather be in love than be married. She wants to be able to have her own freedom. She also mentions that women should receive payment for marriage because women mostly go into marriage for wealth than for the man. I found this to be very interesting since we have not really seen a woman that was against marriage up until this point. She is almost a revolutionary in this sense. Some people do not believe that Heloise actually wrote her letters to Abelard. The people who believe that the documents are real have said that the people who do not believe the documents are real only believe this because of preconceived notions. These preconceived notions probably have to do with the fact that Heloise is a female, sexist notions. There is also another set of letters that some historians believe were written by Abelard and Heloise in addition to the letters that I mentioned before, but they can only find circumstantial evidence to prove that this is true, and there is no solid proof found. So this idea was kind of thrown out. Some historians also believe that Heloise was opposed to a relationship with Abelard. They believe that she never consented and that she resisted his advances and that he was abusing and raping her in all of the stories. In fact, in the fifth letter, Abelard talks about Heloise resisting sex and him forcing himself upon her by striking and taking blows to her. But other historians discredit this by pointing to Heloise's letters, where she only speaks positively about their relationship, more positively than Abelard ever does in his own. She also says that she was the instigator of the relationship in her own letters to Abelard, so that is why other historians disagree with this theory. The story of Abelard and Heloise lives on in many ways. In literature, their story is told in many works, for example, Mark Twain's book, The Innocents Abroad. They are also referenced in many modern books, like Rick Riordan's book, The Trials of Apollo, The Dark Prophecy, and James Carroll's novel, The Cloister. There are artist renderings of the couple that I use throughout the slides. There are also songs written about them, for example, Heloise and Abelard, a song written by SCA bard Evenwiet Wistel. There are also poems inspired by their love story, like the last two letters, for example. There was also a 1971 Broadway show called Abelard and Heloise that told their story. They were even mentioned in an episode of The Sopranos. That's how far-reaching their story is into American culture and culture around the world. These are the discussion questions that we will discuss during the face-to-face discussion and for the online discussion. The first one is the love between Abelard and Heloise something that we have seen before or something different? How does it relate to courtly love and the other examples of Christian love that we have seen thus far? The second question is, how does Christianity play a role in their relationship? Does it enhance or detract from their love? This last letter that I talked a lot about how Heloise must work for her salvation. What did you think of that? How did that play a role? And the last question is, what do you think of their love story? What stood out to you, or what did you find most shocking or interesting? Or is this even a love story? There are a lot of unusual things that happen in their relationship and during their lives. What did you find to be the most peculiar? Here are the sources I used for my presentation, and that's the end.